Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The autumn air carried the scent of pumpkin spice and fallen leaves as Steve trudged down the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He clutched a garment bag close to his chest, dreading what lay inside. How had he let himself get talked into this ridiculous costume swap? "It'll be fun," Stephanie had insisted, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You've always been curious about my lion-taming act. Now's your chance to try it out." Steve had agreed, thinking he'd get to crack a whip and boss around a person in a lion suit. What he hadn't realized was that he'd be the one in costume, a leopard print bodysuit, to be precise. As he approached his sister's apartment, Steve's stomach churned with anxiety. He hesitated before knocking, took a deep breath to steel himself, then rapped his knuckles against the door. Stephanie flung it open, already decked out in Steve's planned lion-tamer costume. The fitted red jacket and black pants suited her athletic frame perfectly. A coiled whip hung at her hip, completing the look. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd chickened out," she said with a grin. "Come on in and get changed. We need to practice before the Halloween festival tonight." Steve shuffled inside, clutching the garment bag like a shield. "I'm having second thoughts about this, Steph. Maybe we should just stick to our original plan." "No way! A deal's a deal. Now strip down and squeeze into that catsuit, bro. We don't have all day." With a resigned sigh, Steve retreated to the bathroom to change. He unzipped the garment bag and cringed at the gleaming spandex within. It took several minutes of awkward contortions before he managed to pour himself into the unforgiving fabric. Steve stared at his reflection, hardly recognizing the figure staring back. The costume hugged every curve and contour of his body. He'd never felt so exposed. "You decent in there?" Stephanie called through the door. "Let's see how it looks." "Just a sec," Steve replied, his voice strained. He ran a hand through his shaggy hair, trying to psych himself up. It was just one night, he reminded himself. He could get through this. Swallowing his pride, Steve emerged from the bathroom. Stephanie's eyes widened as she took in the sight of her brother in the leopard print. "Wow," she breathed. "That actually looks amazing on you. Who knew you were hiding such a hot bod under those baggy clothes?" Steve felt his cheeks burn. "Shut up," he muttered. "This is so embarrassing." "No, I'm serious!" Stephanie circled around him, admiring the costume from all angles. "Your legs look a mile long, and that waist. Maybe you should have been born a girl." Something stirred in Steve's chest at those words. A strange flutter he couldn't quite identify. He pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on his discomfort. "Can we just get this over with? What am I supposed to do in this getup anyway?" Stephanie's grin widened. "Oh, you're going to love this part. I've got the whole routine planned out." For the next hour, she walked Steve through an elaborate dance number, complete with acrobatic leaps and sensual hip rolls. Despite his initial reluctance, Steve found himself getting into the spirit of things. There was something oddly freeing about prancing around in the sleek costume. "You're a natural," Stephanie exclaimed as Steve executed a particularly graceful backbend. "How are you so flexible?" Steve shrugged, surprised to find he was actually enjoying himself. "Guess all those yoga classes are finally paying off." As they ran through the routine again, Steve caught glimpses of himself in the mirror, the way the costume accentuated his lean physique, the fluid grace of his movements. He barely recognized himself. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to actually be a woman. The thought sent an unexpected thrill through him. Before he knew it, it was time to head to the Halloween festival. Stephanie insisted on doing Steve's makeup, transforming him with smoky eyeshadow and false lashes. She even convinced him to wear a long, wavy wig to complete the look. "There," Stephanie said, putting the finishing touches on Steve's lips. "Now you're the prettiest kitty at the ball." Steve stared at his reflection, stunned by the transformation. The person looking back at him was undeniably feminine and strangely alluring. he felt a confusing mix of embarrassment and exhilaration. They arrived at the festival just as the sun was setting. The fairgrounds were alive with the sights and sounds of Halloween, jack-o'-lanterns grinning from every corner, the scent of caramel apples and cotton candy wafting through the air. Steve trailed behind Stephanie, acutely aware of the eyes following him. To his surprise, the attention wasn't altogether unpleasant. He found himself standing a little taller, swaying his hips as he walked. "There's our stage," Stephanie said, pointing to a small platform near the center of the fairgrounds. "You ready for your big debut?" Steve nodded, a nervous excitement bubbling up inside him. As they climbed the steps to the stage, he heard whispers ripple through the gathering crowd. "Look at that costume. Is that a guy or a girl? Whoever it is, they're hot!" The music started, and Steve let instinct take over. He moved with a fluid grace he never knew he possessed, every motion accentuated by the clinging fabric of his costume. Stephanie cracked her whip, and Steve responded with a playful growl, much to the audience's delight. As they went through their routine, Steve found himself fully immersed in the role. He wasn't just play acting anymore. For those precious minutes on stage, he truly felt like a fierce, sensual feline. The crowd's energy fueled him, driving him to new heights of performance. When the music ended, the applause was thunderous. Steve stood there panting, awash in adrenaline and endorphins. He'd never experienced anything quite like it. "That was incredible," Stephanie squealed, throwing her arms around him as they left the stage. "You were born for this." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Steve found himself the center of attention wherever they went, receiving compliments and admiring glances from men and women alike. He reveled in the positive feedback, surprised by how much he enjoyed being seen as attractive and desirable. As the night wore on, Steve's initial discomfort faded entirely. He found himself adopting more feminine mannerisms, softening his voice, gesturing more expressively with his hands. It felt natural, like slipping into a role he was always meant to play. When they finally returned to Stephanie's apartment in the early hours of the morning, Steve was reluctant to change out of his costume. He lingered in front of the mirror, admiring his reflection one last time. "You know," Stephanie said, watching him with a knowing smile, "if you wanted to borrow some of my clothes sometime, just to experiment, I wouldn't mind." Steve met her eyes in the mirror, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. I might take you up on that," he said softly. In the weeks that followed, Steve found his thoughts returning again and again to that Halloween night. He couldn't shake the memory of how alive he'd felt in that costume, how right it had seemed to move and be perceived as a woman. He began to do research online, reading about gender identity and the experiences of transgender individuals. The more he learned, the more things began to click into place. Feelings and uncertainties he'd pushed aside for years suddenly made sense. One evening, he worked up the courage to talk to Stephanie about it. They sat on her couch, steaming mugs of tea warming their hands. "So, remember how you said I could borrow some of your clothes?" Steve began hesitantly. Stephanie nodded, her expression open and encouraging. "Well, I've been thinking a lot about that night, about how it felt to be seen as a woman, and I think maybe I want to explore that more." "Oh, Steve," Stephanie said softly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "I'm so glad you're telling me this. I kind of had a feeling, the way you lit up that night. I'd never seen you so comfortable in your own skin." Tears pricked at Steve's eyes, relief washing over him. "So you're okay with this? With me, maybe, not being your brother anymore?" "Hey," Stephanie said firmly, "you'll always be my sibling, no matter what, and I love you no matter how you identify. If exploring your gender is what you need to do to be happy, then I'm 100% behind you." They spent the rest of the night talking, laughing, and crying together. Stephanie helped Steve brainstorm feminine names he might want to try out. They settled on Stella, a nod to his birth name, but with a softer, more feminine energy. Over the next few months, Stella, as Steve now thought of herself, began to transition slowly. She started with small changes, growing out her hair, shaving her legs, experimenting with makeup. Each step filled her with a sense of rightness, like puzzle pieces falling into place. Stephanie was an invaluable support, offering advice on fashion and skincare and standing up for Stella when others didn't understand. Together, they went shopping for a new wardrobe, giggling like schoolgirls as Stella tried on dresses and heels for the first time. The journey wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear about how the world would perceive her. But with each passing day, Stella grew more confident in her true self. She began seeing a therapist who specialized in gender identity issues, working through her feelings and preparing for the possibility of medical transition. The process was daunting, but Stella felt more certain with each session that this was the right path for her. As spring bloomed, Stella made the decision to come out to her friends and coworkers. She was nervous, but the happiness and relief of living authentically outweighed her fears. To her surprise and delight, most people were supportive. There were a few awkward moments and uncomfortable questions, but overall, Stella felt embraced by her community. Her coworkers quickly adapted to her new name and pronouns, and her friends rallied around her with love and acceptance. One year after that fateful Halloween night, Stella stood in front of her mirror, marveling at how far she'd come. Her hair now fell in soft waves past her shoulders. Hormone therapy had begun to soften her features and reshape her body. The person staring back at her finally matched the woman she'd always been inside. Stephanie appeared in the doorway, holding up a garment bag with a mischievous grin. "Hey, sis, guess what I found?" Stella's eyes widened as Stephanie unzipped the bag to reveal the leopard print costume, the catalyst that had started it all. "No way," Stella laughed. "I can't believe you kept that thing." "Of course I did," Stephanie replied. "I thought maybe you'd want to wear it again, for old time's sake." Stella hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You know what? I think I do." As she slipped into the costume, Stella was struck by how different it felt now. Where once it had been a source of embarrassment, now it felt like coming full circle, a celebration of her journey and the woman she'd become. "Well," Stephanie asked as Stella emerged from the bathroom, "how does it feel?" Stella did a little twirl, laughing as the familiar fabric hugged her curves that were now undeniably feminine. "It feels like me," she said simply, "like I'm finally truly me." As they headed out to that year's Halloween festival, Stella's heart swelled with gratitude. What had started as a reluctant costume swap had led her to discover her authentic self. She walked tall and proud, ready to take on the world as the woman she was always meant to be. The fairgrounds were just as magical as Stella remembered, but this time she wasn't hiding behind a costume. She was simply herself, and that was the most liberating feeling of all. Stella and Stephanie made their way through the bustling fairgrounds, the familiar sights and smells evoking memories of that transformative night 1 year ago. Carved pumpkins leered from every corner, their flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows across the paths. The air was thick with the scent of caramel apples and the excited chatter of costumed revelers. "I can't believe it's been a whole year," Stella mused, running her hand along the soft fabric of her leopard print bodysuit. "So much has changed." Stephanie squeezed her sister's hand. "You've come so far. I'm so proud of you, you know that?" Stella's eyes misted over. "I couldn't have done it without you, Steph. You've been my rock through all of this." As they wandered through the festival, Stella found herself drawing admiring glances from passers-by. But unlike last year, when the attention had been a mix of confusion and curiosity, now people saw her for who she truly was, a confident, beautiful woman. They paused at a fortune teller's booth, its gauzy curtains billowing in the crisp autumn breeze. The sign above proclaimed, "Madame Zarella sees all." "Oh, we have to do this," Stephanie giggled, tugging Stella toward the entrance. Inside, the small tent was bathed in a warm, purple glow. Madame Zarella, a wizened woman draped in colorful scarves, peered at them over a glowing crystal ball. "Ah, welcome, my dears," she intoned in a raspy voice. "Who seeks to glimpse their future?" Stella hesitated, then stepped forward. "I will." Madame Zarella's eyes twinkled as she gestured for Stella to sit. "Give me your hands, child." As Stella placed her hands in the fortune-teller's gnarled ones, she felt a strange tingling sensation. Madame Zarella closed her eyes, humming softly. "I see. Great change," she murmured. "A butterfly emerging from its chrysalis. You have undergone a remarkable transformation, my dear." Stella exchanged a surprised glance with Stephanie. Could the woman really see her past? "But your journey is not over," Madame Zarella continued. "There are still challenges ahead, but fear not. You have the strength within you to overcome them. And," she paused, a smile playing at her lips, "I see love on the horizon, a kindred spirit who will understand and cherish you for who you truly are." As they left the tent, Stella felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Do you think she could really see my future?" she asked Stephanie. Her sister shrugged. "Who knows, but I like her prediction. You deserve all the happiness in the world, Stella." They continued their exploration of the festival, stopping to try their luck at carnival games and indulge in sugary treats. As they approached the main stage area, Stella felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Look," Stephanie said, pointing to a sign. "They're having an open mic talent show. You should totally do your routine." Stella balked. "I don't know, Steph. It's been a year. I'm not sure I remember all the moves." "Nonsense," Stephanie insisted. "It's muscle memory. Come on, it'll be fun." Before Stella could protest further, Stephanie was dragging her to the sign-up table. Minutes later, Stella found herself waiting in the wings, heart pounding as she listened to the other acts. "Next up," the announcer called, "Stella the Sensational Leopard Lady." Taking a deep breath, Stella stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, momentarily blinding her to the crowd. But as the music started, the same pulsing beat from a year ago, something magical happened. Stella's body moved of its own accord, muscle memory kicking in as she began to dance. But this time, it was different. Her movements were more fluid, more graceful, imbued with a confidence and sensuality that came from truly inhabiting her body. As she twirled and leapt across the stage, Stella felt a profound sense of joy. This wasn't just a performance. It was a celebration of her journey, of the woman she'd become. She poured every ounce of emotion into her dance, her body telling the story of her transformation. The crowd went wild, their cheers and applause washing over Stella like a wave. As she struck her final pose, panting and exhilarated, she caught sight of Stephanie in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she clapped and whooped. Stella took a bow, basking in the moment. As she straightened up, her eyes locked with someone in the audience, a tall, striking woman with close-cropped hair and intense green eyes. The woman was staring at Stella with a look of awe and something else. Recognition, perhaps? As Stella left the stage, still riding high on adrenaline, she found herself face to face with the green-eyed woman. "That was incredible," the woman said, her voice low and melodious. "I've never seen anyone dance with such authenticity." Stella felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you, I'm Stella." "Olivia," the woman replied, extending her hand. As their fingers touched, Stella felt a spark of electricity. "I hope this isn't too forward, but would you like to get a coffee sometime? I'd love to hear your story." Stella's heart skipped a beat. Was this the kindred spirit Madame Zarella had predicted? "I'd like that," she said softly. As Olivia scribbled her number on a napkin, Stephanie appeared at Stella's side, grinning from ear to ear. "You were amazing up there, sis." Stella introduced the two, her mind whirling with possibilities. As they made plans to meet up with Olivia later in the week, Stella couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come. 1 year ago, she'd been a reluctant participant in a costume swap, unsure of herself and her place in the world. Now she stood tall and proud, fully embracing her true self. The leopard print costume that had once been a source of embarrassment now felt like a second skin, a symbol of her transformation and the strength she'd found within herself. As they left the festival that night, the autumn air crisp and invigorating, Stella felt a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. She had faced her fears, embraced her truth, and come out stronger on the other side. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she had the courage to face them head-on. With Stephanie by her side and new possibilities on the horizon, Stella strode into the night, ready to write the next chapter of her story, one where she was finally, unequivocally herself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.